Here, Honourable Member for Banff-Kananaskis.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And I'd like to thank the member for bringing this bill to the floor, if anything, for giving us an opportunity to talk about parks and how awesome they are. I am opposed to the bill, but I like to talk about national parks and provincial parks all the time, so I'm happy to be here. So the reasons, there are several reasons why I'm opposed to this bill. The first one is that it's unnecessary. It's creating an additional layer of bureaucracy where one is not needed. So the National Parks Act, that all national parks, urban national parks included, are created under, Section 6, Sub 1 says the Governor and Council may, by order for the purpose of establishing or enlarging a park reserve, amend Schedule 2 by adding the name and a description of the reserve or by altering the description of the reserve if the Governor and Council is satisfied that the government of the province in which the lands to be included in the reserve are situated has agreed to their use for that purpose. So you see, Madam Speaker, the National Parks Act actually already requires approval of the province in order for a national park to be created. The other thing I wanted to share with people of the House today is that the process to create a national park is not an easy one. It doesn't happen overnight. Parks Canada is not on some mad land grab to pull all these pieces of land from across Canada and incorporate them into the park system. I have had the great privilege of working on various national park campaigns and provincial park campaigns. And one thing I can tell you for sure is that it takes a long time, decades sometimes, to create a new protected area. And through that time, every single stakeholder with an interest in those lands is engaged in the conversation, whether that be private landowners, various stakeholder groups, environmental groups, industry, recreationists, and of course the province, various jurisdictions that have an interest in those lands, whether that be municipalities, provincial governments, and in the case of national parks, federal governments. It is a misrepresentation of the National Parks Act and of the National Parks process and the role of Parks Canada to suggest that the province does not have an opportunity to approve or be involved in the conversation around creating a national urban park. That is simply not an accurate representation of the Act, and so therefore this Act is redundant, and it is unnecessary because of that. We have heard from members opposite every private member's bill that we've debated so far that has originated from this side of the House that it's redundant and it's unnecessary. And yet here we are having a conversation again about a private member's bill that is redundant and unnecessary, except this time it's coming from the UCP. And that's disappointing to me. The other part of this that I think is important to remember is that when a community has an idea to create a park or protected area, it is important that all possible tools of protection be considered. There are many different kinds of provincial parks and provincial recreation areas in our own provincial legislation, as well as national parks. And when a community group sits down with this idea of this land needs to be protected, say the Edmonton River Valley, they should have all of that suite of options available to them, because every park and protected area has different allowances, regulations, and different specific characteristics. That needs to be part of the conversation. There's no point in removing national parks from the conversation. They do something different on the land than other provincial legislated protected areas, and that is why the community of Edmonton has gone for a national park in this case. If the province is so afraid that this is federal overreach and we shouldn't have a national park here, well, they could probably create a provincial park if they wanted to. But I'm not seeing the province step up and suggest that protecting the Edmonton River Valley legislatively through the Alberta Parks Act is on the table. So if they're not willing to come to the table with that option, then national parks might be the best option for this particular park. This bill adds red tape to the conversation, it adds bureaucracy, and it stifles economic development that comes from tourism. I'm not sure why the government would want to stifle economic development anywhere. but especially from tourism that tends to be sustainable, long-lasting, and is a part of celebrating what makes Alberta great, which I hear from the other side of the House is such a big objective all the time. We need to share with the world how great Alberta is, and yet here they are trying to stop us from sharing with the world how great Alberta is. Tourism in our existing national parks and our provincial parks is big business. Emphasis on big, but the businesses may be small, medium, or large. There's billions of dollars and thousands of businesses that rely on parks and protected areas for their income. The communities of Banff, Jasper, and Canmore rely on the national parks for their economic success as rural communities. In 2017 alone, these three communities of Banff, Jasper, and Canmore generated $2.7 billion in economic impact for the province and $192,000 in taxes for the province. And a big portion of that money came from the fact that these communities are close to some of Canada's best national parks. The municipality of Edmonton could also benefit from having Canada's second urban national park, which would be very history-making. My colleague from Edmonton Rutherford and also my colleagues from the other side of the House have commented on how special the Edmonton River Valley is. There is no doubt that this is a spectacular place and something to be celebrated. The Edmonton River Valley is the largest stretch of urban parkland in North America. We should be celebrating that. Designating a national park could be a way that we do that. Designating it as a provincial park could do that too, but as I've said, the government doesn't seem to want to throw that out as an option. Protecting urban green space is critical to tourism provision in municipalities, but it's also critical to urban biodiversity enhancement and environmental protections. Despite what the members opposite say, this is an example of massive provincial government overreach into a municipality. The province is overstepping here. The Edmonton City Council voted 10-3 to move forward with exploring an urban national park. Just like the town council in Canmore unanimously voted not to have the Three Sisters Mountain Village development, and the province came in and said, no, you have to do this. So this is an example of a municipality voting one way and the province saying, no, no, we have to be involved. When the province criticizes Ottawa and Trudeau all the time for the exact same thing, that makes this bill really hypocritical. So it's okay. It's not okay if Ottawa intrudes on the province, but it's totally okay for the province to intrude on municipalities. That's what this bill is doing. The other thing is that we really should be moving reconciliation forward. And one of the best ways to do that is with land management and co-management and collaborative management agreements with Indigenous groups. There is so much space to embrace Indigenous groups' involvement in land management of parks and protected areas. The River Valley tells stories of Turtle Island, colonization, the fur trade, industrialization, and environmental protection. Adequate involvement of our Indigenous partners in this land use decision-making is critical. When I was in school in junior high, I had the privilege to snowshoe down the North Saskatchewan River and have an overnight at Fort Edmonton where we learned beading and we pretended to trade beaver furs. It is one of the memories of my school-age time that I cherish. All children should have the opportunity to experience and live Fort Edmonton in this way. The last thing I'll say is that Albertans love their parks. They love them. You start messing with parks and people get upset. They love their parks so much, and also they love making new parks. So in 2000, the members opposite will love it when I say this, former Premier Ralph Klein, oh, you guys aren't even going to give me a little bit there? Former Premier Ralph Klein created Special Places 2000, which was a legacy that Premier Klein left us with, where 81 new parks and protected areas were created, and 2 million hectares of the Alberta landscape were protected as parks and protected areas. Every single one of those hectares came from a local community identifying their special place that needed protection. And every single one of those communities contributed to expanding our parks and protected areas network in Alberta. This is the community of Edmonton identifying their special place and asking for it to be protected. This act is not required to meet the needs of the community, and it actually hinders their progress. Thank you.